Thanks for attending. Welcome to the Municipal Planning Commission meeting for Wednesday, August 21st. It is now 2024, that is, and it is now 5 p.m. I will call the meeting to order. And just so the other members are aware, we do have Member Gullickson will be attending here shortly. Just had some business to attend to, and absent this evening will be Member Ross. With respect to the agenda, any revisions or changes? Member Kentz?
I make a motion to adopt the agenda as presented.
Thank you very much. All those in favor? That is unanimously in favor. Thank you. Our previous meeting was on July 17th. Seems longer than that ago somehow, but there's quite a few notes in there for our meeting. Is there any questions that arose or any inconsistencies there that we need to clean up at this time? Member Kentz?
I'll make a motion to adopt the minutes as presented.
Thank you. Member Contenti, was there anything that you had on those minutes? Good. Very good. All those in favor? That is unanimously in favor as well. And just in order to give us a little time, I'm wondering if it might not be appropriate to go through the summary of existing or of permits issued our development officers at this time. I know it's a little unusual, but give us a couple more minutes to prepare for our two items before us today.
Thank you. So going through these are the decisions that were made by the Development Officer, Development Authority, as of August 21st, 2024. So the first being a daycare facility with a 2-stall or 33% parking variance. And variances over 15% and discretionary uses can be approved by the Development Officer, Development Authority if no opposition or appeals are received. None were received, and so the permit was issued on July 18th, 2024. There's a manufacturing facility, general and accessory use, which was the accessory use was retail sales, and that's at Unit 4, 4013 53rd Avenue. And again, discretionary use permits can be approved by the development officer if no opposition or appeals are received. The accessory use was the discretionary portion of the permit, and the permit was issued on August 13th, 2024. There's a 0.3 or 20% side yard setback variance, and this is for 25 Edith Avenue. This is just for a landing that didn't meet the side yard setback in off of a deck in this property. And again, variances over 15% can be approved by the development officer, and the permit was issued on August 19th. There's also a 0.6 meter, 60% front yard height variance for a fence, and variances over 15% can be approved by the development officer if no opposition or appeals are received, and the permit was issued on August 2nd. And then finally, we have a 10% rear yard setback variance for a deck extension at 42 Mackenzie Avenue, and variances under 15% can be approved by the development officer if no opposition or appeals are received, and none were received, so the permit was issued on August 6th, 2024.
Very good, thank you. Welcome, Member Gullickson. The first, not a problem. The first item was just because it's parking, that's always an issue. Daycare facility, and you said there's a 33%. How many stalls were allowed for?
Through to the chair, I guess. So right now, the parking at the mall is all a shared parking agreement by the management company. So there was originally 6 stalls dedicated. Yes, and then they required 8 as part of our land use bylaw requirements. So since they only had the 6 allocated, it required the 2 stall variance.
Thank you. That's a a come and go thing anyway on a daycare. That's why I asked, just wondering how severe that was when you said 30%. I was thinking it was a larger number than that. Any other questions or concern with any of those? Thank you. So let's move into our development permit applications for this evening. The first one is item 4.1, a side yard setback variance at 5040 56th Street. And Senior Development Officer Kirk, I understand you're going to take us through that item.
Thank you, Chair Creasy. All right, so the report summary, the property is zoned R4 residential mixed district. The purpose is to provide an area for residential development, including well-designed compatible infill development that offers a mix of lower and medium density forms of residential housing types, as well as a limited set of compatible uses. Administration supports the application. So the Commission's decision tonight is to consider a variance to Section 972 of the Land Use Bylaw, which requires a 2.4 meter side yard setback. The applicant is requesting a 1.5 meter setback and therefore requires a 38% variance. So the background, the applicant has valid permits for the construction of a fourplex on the subject site. A fourplex in the R4 district is a permitted use, therefore the development officer was authorized to approve and issue the development permit. The proposal complied with all land use bylaw requirements with the exception of the proposed location of the development's decks. In an effort to not delay the construction of the fourplex, the applicant proceeded with the fourplex and has now submitted a separate development permit application for the variance request on the location of the decks. So there's 4 decks being proposed. Each one is about 5 feet wide and 10 feet long, and they are proposed to be located 1.5 meters from the side property line. Decks in the R4 are typically permitted to be located 1.5 meters from the sidelines. However, if the development contains a principal entry door that is accessed from the rear or sides of the lot, the bylaw then requires the setback to be 2.4 meters. The development does contain principal entry doors that are accessed from the rear. Therefore, the decks should be located at 2.4 meters, and the applicant is requesting a variance to allow them to be located 1.5 meters. 19 property owners were notified. We received 1 response in opposition, and the opposition was regarding privacy concerns. So they agreed to let the developer remove the lilac trees on their property with the understanding that a suitably high fence would be constructed and new trees would be planted to help with privacy. Administration's response is that the development permit for the construction of the fourplex requires the applicant to construct a 6-foot high fence along the side of the property lines. The bylaw does limit side yard fences to 6 feet. So in order to go higher than that, they would require a variance, which would be likely considered by the Municipal Planning Commission, but there's no guarantee of approval for that. And the development permit for the construction of the fourplex also requires the applicant to plant new trees on the subject property to comply with the landscaping requirements. The land use bylaw requires the trees to be planted in the front yard, however, because side yards don't typically have enough space for them to mature. And then there was setback concerns, so they weren't told that there would be planned decks directly on their property. Administration's response is that the decks are not proposed to be constructed directly on either of the adjacent lots. The variance request is to allow the decks to be constructed 1.5 meters from the adjacent lots' property lines. There were concerns regarding noise. So the proposed decks are intended for the exclusive use of each unit's tenant, and any noise concerns would be enforced under the community standards bylaw. And then there was also concerns about smoke pollution from barbecues, and the land use bylaw does not prohibit the use of barbecues or regulate the placement of them, and such on decks or ground level patios. So analysis, variances recognize that not all properties are the same, and in some cases, a development may not be able to happen without a variance being granted. In this case, the decks cannot be constructed without granting a variance, as complying with that 2.4 meter setback would only leave enough room for the decks to be about 2 feet wide. So if you see there, if they're located 1.5 meters, they can be 5 feet wide, and if it's at 2.4 meters, it only leaves enough space for them to be 2 feet wide. And the purpose of the decks is to provide each tenant with their own private amenity area, and the land use bylaw does require that. So administration has reviewed the application, considered the R4 district's requirements, and visited the property, and is of the opinion that the variances should be approved for the following reasons. The decks could be located at 1.5 meters if or from the side property line if the principal entry doors were accessed from the front of the lot. The proposed location would not unduly interfere with amenities of the neighborhood. And if the variance is approved, the decks would be located approximately 2.5 meters from the adjacent house to the south and approximately 9.5 meters from the adjacent house to the north. Therefore, administration is of the opinion that the location of the decks would not materially interfere with or affect the use, enjoyment, or value of neighboring parcels of land. And administration recommends approval. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have an on-screen drawing that we have on our package, page 8? That shows basically a general overall floor plan on the site itself. I think it was the first one that came up there. Okay, so keep in mind the ones that we have here are slightly larger than a postage stamp, so it made it a little difficult to see. I was curious on the one side yard, I believe there's a concrete sidewalk that runs full length. And so then how much are there decks on that side as well?
Correct. Yeah, there are decks on that side.
How much room does it leave for the decks on the side with the walks? Or is the walk not continuous?
To the chair, I think I understand what you're getting at. So the dimensions on the sidewalk is the 1.5 meters. So the sidewalk will span the majority of the side yard setback. Bear in mind the decks are off the second floor.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That makes it much clearer. I was looking at this and I was, confused. Thank you. And if I had looked at the elevation below, it wouldn't have been a problem. So thank you for that. I guess that brings about the next question and the privacy item. If these are second floor decks, anything short of a 20-foot high fence isn't going to help with anything anyway. So which isn't going to happen. So. Member Kent's?
It's an interesting application due, for me anyway. The house was approved without the decks in the beginning. Were the doors there? Were the doors obviously? So if it was approved, the doors obviously weren't there at one point in time. So somewhere down the line, it changed. Was that planned, or was it something that came up later? Like it's a weird application for that purpose, that it wasn't there and now it's there.
Through the chair to member Kent. So this is a unique application in the sense of the house itself without the decks is a permitted use. We can issue those permits quite quickly and without much concern because it met all the setbacks. It's a permitted use. You don't have to circulate to adjacent landowners. It's kind of a, here's your condition set and go forward as you see fit. So it's a lot quicker turnaround. With this specific application and the developer, when we did our first initial preliminary review, the doors and the decks were there. And we went through a different list of options because timing for the developer, and the applicant is here tonight, was very crucial to do with their construction timelines. So one of the options we offered the developer was to process the two permits separately so they could get their initial approval to get the foundation and framing in. If this does get refused or denied, there will be plans amendments to basically turn those doors into windows. And then they will have to figure out an amenity area for each unit. So for this one, the reason they're two separate applications was just to get the timing down, to get the permitted use dealt with, and then that way they can still move forward with that even if the variance is not approved.
And initially then they were also shown to be much narrower with the anticipated 5-foot width here. They were shown at the initial application at the 3-foot, which would have met the overall setback, and now they would like them to be a little wider.
No, so to the chair, so the original application is what you're seeing in front of you.
Okay.
The only portion of this building that requires a variance whatsoever, and bear in mind, it's only because there's a rear entrance. If there was only front entrances, these would meet and it'd be a permitted use.
Thank you.
So this was always the original drawing. There hasn't been any changes or anything like that. It was just a way to expedite the structure itself as an approval.
Thank you for that clarification. Appreciate it. Member Kent.
Thanks, Chair Creasy. Don't you feel that that's kind of misleading to the neighbors, the adjacent neighbors? Push it through and then, hey, we'll come back after the house is kind of constructed. Like, I just feel it's kind of misleading, and there might have been some opposition prior to this. I'm not saying it's a bad idea. I'm just saying I just feel that was kind of a sidebar, a side way of going around the application.
Through the chair to member Kent. So I agree with what you're saying in the sense of you can understand how it could be misleading to some of the public. This is, again, if it came forward as one application and let's say it got denied with just one fourplex with the decks, the developer could come back in the next day and do a permitted use fourplex without the decks, and we could approve it the next day. So realistically, no matter what, the fourplex can go forward, and that's not misleading in the sense it's a permitted use in that district. Again, they're getting notified the way they should have been. There was a proper circulation period, and it's been brought forward to MPC because of the opposition that was received. So I don't think it's misleading in that regard. And again, the developer, I believe, did speak with both adjacent landowners prior to coming to the city.
Member Gullickson.
Thank you, Chair Creasy. I'd like to apologize for being a little late, just a little bit of a glitch. Now, the back entrance, that's the front entrance for that fourplex, isn't it?
Through the chair to member Gullickson, yes and no. It's the front entrance for two of the units, but that the rear property line is what's adjacent to, is it a lane there, I believe, Jen? So that is considered the rear because it's adjacent to the lane. The front property line is what's adjacent to the road. So it's how the land use bylaw defines front and rear, not necessarily
The structure.
that is the front of their unit.
It's the front of the unit, and
Yeah.
they're all split in there. So there's no through, obviously. Does that door provide better safety for those units by having that door on the side? Because there's only one exit, correct, out of the fourplexes. So I would think that door would allow another egress out of the building. Yeah, I mean, if it turns into a window, you can't get out as easily as you can out of a doorway, correct?
Through the chair to member Gullickson, yes, I see what you're saying now.
Yeah.
That is a secondary exit.
Yeah, for each one of the units.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
A lot of page turning going on, not many motions. Member Kent.
I don't have any concerns with it. I think it looks fine. Nice to see some stairs down it and onto the sidewalk. But however, I would like to make a motion to approve the development permit for a 0.9 meter, 38% side yard setback variance on four sides, or sorry, on four decks, proposed to be constructed on 50, 40, 56th Street, Lot 4, Block 40, Plan 4048 HW, Zone Residential Mixed District, with the following conditions.
Thank you, Member Kent. So it really is only just the two conditions, correct? which is really nothing too onerous. These are pretty standard ones, so I'm not even going to ask. Not even going to ask the proponent on these. Does anyone have any other questions or concerns? And I will call the question, please. Actually, we don't use them. We're going to vote on the machines. With respect to the motion before us, all those in favor? That is unanimously in favor. Next up is an accessory building with variances on 16 Taylor Drive. Item 4.2, Senior Officer Kirk, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair Creasy. All right, so the report summary for this one, the application is for an oversized and overheight accessory residential building, which is a rear detached garage containing 2 stories. The property is zoned R1N Residential Narrow District. The purpose is to provide an area for residential development in the form of detached dwellings and compatible uses on narrow lots. Administration does not support the application. The Commission's decision tonight is a variance to 3 sections of the land use bylaw. The first one is section 914.2 on lot coverage. The next one is section 921CI on building size. And the third one is section 921I on height. So the proposal, the garage is proposed to be located in accordance with the land use bylaw. However, it does require a variance to lot coverage, size, and height. So under lot coverage, the land use bylaw requires garages or accessory buildings that include sheds, carports, etc. in the R1N district to cover no more than 15% of the lot. The subject lot is approximately 449.20 meters squared, and the accessory building is proposed to be 112.7 meters squared, and therefore would cover 25% of the lot. The applicant is requesting a 67% lot coverage variance. Size, so the land use bylaw requires accessory buildings to be smaller than the principal building, that's the house, on site, but not exceed individually 70 meters squared. The house is approximately 122.39 meters squared, and the garage is proposed to be 112.7 meters squared. The structure would be 9.69 meters squared smaller than the house. However, it does exceed that 70 meters squared size limitation by 42.7 square meters. The applicant is requesting a 61% size variance. Height, so the land use bylaw requires the garage to not exceed the height of the house. The house is approximately 7.96 meters in height, and the accessory building is proposed to be 9.77 meters. Therefore, it would exceed the height of the house by 1.81 meters or 6 feet, and the applicant is requesting a 23% height variance. So 32 property owners were notified. At the time of writing the report, we received one letter in support, and we received 7 in opposition. We also received 1 more in opposition this morning that has been handed out individually. It didn't have comments, it just checked the box that they opposed the application. So some of the summarized feedback that we got back, we'll go with the support ones first. So they spoke with the owner and understand the reasoning behind the garage. The development will help remove vehicles off the street and provide jobs to contractors hired to construct it. And they fully support the project as long as it does not become a rental suite upstairs. Administration's response is that the applicant's letter of intent states that the purpose of the structure is for personal use only, and that the landowner is not interested in using the garage for rental purposes, as he currently has a rental property elsewhere in Lacombe, and he's satisfied with that. Then we'll move into the opposition. So there were comments regarding height concerns. Secondary buildings should not exceed the height of the house. The height is too tall. It's beyond normal for a residential area and doesn't belong. The proposed height may result in overshadowing, reducing natural light, and affecting the privacy of adjacent properties. The structure will block the view and tower over properties, and the proposed height of the structure will affect sight lines and affect the overall aesthetics of the neighborhood. Administration's response is that the garage is proposed to be 6 feet taller than the house, therefore they are requesting that 23% height variance. There is no record of a permit for a garage of this size in the immediate area, so therefore the proposal would not be compatible in scale to the residential developments in the immediate vicinity, and the proposed height would materially interfere with or affect the use, enjoyment, or value of neighboring parcels of land due to its height. The next were concerns regarding intent. So they're concerned about the purpose of the second floor and if the structure will be used for residential or business purposes. The owner currently rents a shop, and there are concerns that his equipment will be moving into the proposed structure and he will be running a commercial business from it. There's also concerns that the structure will be used as a second dwelling, mother-in-law suite, or a rental property. They've heard that the proposed building is to be used as a refrigeration business and possibly an upstairs rental. The structure seems more industrial than residential. It looks like a barn for an acreage. A building like this isn't just for parking vehicles. It likely means they're going to be doing some sort of activity in it, whether that's repairs or construction or something similar, but they don't want that in the neighborhood. And if the structure is approved, what happens if it starts to be used for commercial or rental purposes? So administration's response is that, again, the applicant's letter of intent does state that the purpose is for personal use only. He's not interested in renting it out. It also states that it will not be used as a home-based business. If the structure is approved, the development permit will contain a condition prohibiting the landowner from using the structure as a home-based business or as a secondary dwelling unit or any overnight accommodation. And if the city receives a written complaint that it's being used for commercial or rental purposes, we will follow up and conduct an inspection and determine its use. If it's deemed that it is being used for these things, the landowner will be required to obtain the proper permits. Both of those uses, home-based business and a garden suite is what it's called, a rental suite, are discretionary. And so the neighbors would get notification and the application would be presented to the Municipal Planning Commission for a decision. There was opposition regarding parking and traffic concerns. So street parking is already very difficult. The property owner has multiple big commercial trucks and trailers and doesn't have enough space as is. So parking all of his trucks seems impossible. There'd be increased traffic, vehicles, and possibly equipment on both the road and alley. And if the structure will be used for business or rental purposes, the neighborhood can't support the traffic of the employees, customers, renters, etc. Administration's response is that the land use bylaw requires 2 on-site parking stalls. If the garage is approved, the 2 stalls would be accounted for within the garage and it would comply with the bylaw. And if the structure is approved and a parking complaint is received, that would be followed up by bylaw services as well as planning and development to determine any community standard or bylaw contraventions. There was opposition about overcrowding concerns. So the proposed increase in lot coverage and size of the garage could result in overcrowding of the lot, reducing the available open space and altering the overall appearance of the property in a way that is inconsistent with the neighboring homes. And so again, there is no record of a permit for this size in the immediate area, so it would not be consistent with the surrounding area. There was concerns regarding precedent setting. So if we approve such significant variances, then they could set a precedent for future developments in the neighborhood, potentially leading to further requests that could undermine the intent of our zoning regulations and degrade the character of the area. And if the structure is to be used for business purposes, it would set a precedent for an industrial use in a residential area. So administration's response is, if the proposal is approved, the development permit will contain a condition prohibiting the landowner from using it as a business. And then the last comment that we received was that they believe the proposed building may result in devaluation of the property, and administration is unable to comment on that. Analysis. So the applicant has indicated in the letter of intent that the purpose is for personal items, and the variances are required for the following reasons: to accommodate the landowner's 10-foot tall Mercedes Sprinter van with a rooftop storage rack, to provide enough space around the van to allow for items to be moved in and out as needed, to provide for overall garage usability, and to provide the landowner's wife with enough space to move vehicles in and out of the structure. The letter of intent also notes that the applicant adjusted the initial 6 and 12 roof pitch to keep the structure under that 10-meter height requirement. However, the R1N district does limit any building to 10 meters in height, but then the accessory residential building section of the land use bylaw says that if it doesn't contain a garden suite, it has to be smaller than the house. So because it's still higher than the house, it does require that height variance. And variances recognize that not all properties are the same. Sometimes the development can't happen without it. Administration has reviewed the application, considered the requirements for all R1N properties, and visited the property, but was unable to identify reasons that the property is unique in a way that warrants the 3 variances. Administration is of the opinion that the lot does not contain any topographical features or unique factors which prevent the proposal from complying with the bylaw. Administration recommends that the variances in the application be refused. Thank you.
Thank you, Senior Development Officer Kirk. Appreciate that. Who would like to start? Member Gullickson.
Thank you, Chair Creasy. It does seem extreme, like as far as the number of variances and the percentages. I really have a big concern about the height of the building. I mean, if it was a garage just for parking purposes, then maybe, but the 67% variance, I believe it is on lot size, is that correct or? Not yet.
Not just yet, no.
But yeah, I do have concerns regarding the amount of the lot that's being taken up there. And I mean, this lot is probably not the right one for this building. I hate to say it, but there's other lots in the community that would be better suited. I will not be supporting this. Thank you.
Anyone else? So I would assume that we do have the proponent with us and would like to speak. If you'd care to come up and have a seat here, I would welcome you to share your thoughts with us.
I guess I appreciate all the feedback. So I guess I didn't understand the full procedure. So I am more than willing to compromise on the height to meet the, what is the proper word? To meet the bylaw spec or whatever it is. I'm more than willing to adjust on the height. I communicated to a whole bunch of neighbors, and that was one of their main issues, was the height and the privacy. And I agreed with them. I wish I had effectively communicated before. So I will be adjusting the height to meet compliance with the height, because I understand privacy and I understand blocking the sun or whatever it is. So I will be adjusting that accordingly to meet compliance with the height variance. So we will be adjusting that. But I mean, I've communicated with 13 of the neighbors, and I wish I had done this prior, but unfortunately I did not do that. I wish I had done that. Number two is for this, so I'm willing to go down to more than willing to go down to the height variances and keep it at the same. And then I just want to address the mechanical side of doing work in there. So for the job that I do, I don't bring work home because I can't. I do repairs at Ole Mill. I work on their equipment. All the work that I do is on site in industrial sites. You can't take a compressor off the roof that weighs 20,000 pounds. So there can be no work brought home. I have lived at that address since 2007, and I've done a refrigeration job since 2007, and there's no physical way to bring work home. It's just, we work remote and we work on other people's sites and I fix stuff. So there's no way that I can bring stuff home. So that part of it will not be happening because I've lived there and I've never brought any work home because I can't. So for the fine tuning to bringing it down, and then, yeah, so my vans, that's for, after consulting with my draftsman, you know, we can adjust that. And for the top, simply a man cave. I hate to say it, but I live with 4 other women in the house, and to put it simply, I'm of the age where it's nice to have a man cave, and I respect that people saying that this is not the best application for the lot, and I agree with you. I just want to come to a reasonable conclusion that balances the rules and regulations and balancing with the neighbors of people you have to live with. So we will be adjusting and eliminating the height variances because that was the number one concern of the neighbors. As of for the rest of it, we make an effort, we make an effort as a family to work with our neighbors. Therefore, you know, for the commercial vehicles, they are parked at the airport storage just down the street, and we rent 3 parking spaces there to work with our neighbors to say, hey, we understand that the vans are big and they're parked out front. So we make the effort to take 3 vehicles off the street and park them in a proper storage place so they do not go on the street in the first place. So I have made every reasonable effort to accommodate the neighbors and to communicate to them and to talk to them and to come to a reasonable conclusion. That's where I stand.
Thank you for all that clarification. I appreciate it. Member Contenti?
Yes, to the chair, Chrissy. To the proponent, is there any possibility of reducing the overall square footage of this to
Actually, just give
decrease
me
the
one.
variance size?
Of course, yeah, we can.
Can we negotiate on, because we got a 67% variance, right? Okay. I'm willing to take 15% off of that, reduce it 15-20% to be within a reasonable amount. Is that acceptable? Go ahead. Sorry, I'm sorry. I'm pressing.
No worries. Just to chime in here to the commission, if there is going to be talks of negotiation, I would recommend that MPC defer the decision until such time as revised plans have been submitted to administration for our review.
And that is a great advice. I was going to say the same thing. This is not really a time for negotiation at this
Well,
juncture.
And I didn't
However,
know.
I'm not completed. However, there is a path forward to do that. Quite honestly, I would like to be able to see you have an accessory building that meets some of your needs. By the looks of what you have here, I think it's unrealistic to expect to have one that's going to meet them all if this is what you require, because we struggle to get properties in compliance when there's one variance. When there's 3 major ones, it's very difficult. And I appreciate you suggesting that you will adjust the building height and whatnot. And we will have a path forward to do so and be able to have a better understanding of exactly what you have in mind, because my expectation is you're going to hear from other individuals here as it sits here. What's before us is not acceptable. And for all of the reasons you've stated, I completely understand why you want to have a space there. And I would like for you to be able to produce something that will fit into the neighborhood and accomplish what you want it to. In saying that, not every property is suitable for every wish, and this one is just stretching the limits a little too much to be acceptable from my perspective. In order to keep things open and amenable for future adjustments, I'm understanding that perhaps a deferral of decision today might be in order. Is that a reasonable route to go?
To the chair, yeah, that's a reasonable route if that's MPC's wish. For timeline purposes, we do have applications scheduled for both the September 4th and September 17th meetings. So dependent on when a revised plan is submitted, we more than likely would need to recirculate it just because it's most likely going to be a significant change. So we would require a 2-week circulation period before it comes back to MPC. So if you go with a deferral, you'd be looking most likely at the earliest mid-September.
Yeah, I mean, quite honestly, from this board's perspective, when it comes back to us, is not as much relevance as it is to the proponent, who's probably interested in having this sooner as opposed to later. But I appreciate that the neighborhood has to be consulted, and if that is all right with the commission, that would be my recommendation, is that we defer Do we do that as a board decision through motion, or how do we go? Okay. So if someone would consider making that motion, in this particular case, I think that would be the best route to go. Just for people either watching at home or for individuals in the gallery to understand the process here is that we don't really have the luxury of negotiating a bunch of different types of buildings and setbacks and that kind of thing at this point, because of the fact that we must portray those types of or that type of information to the properties within 60 meters of this lot, just as was done to garner the input that was here so far. And painful as it can be at certain times, it doesn't matter if any of us like it or not. That is what we are required to do by Alberta law. End of story. That's what's set before us through the Municipal Government Act. So that's something that we have to do. We don't have a choice on it at this board, nor does administration. So, Member Gullickson.
Thank you, Chair Creasy. I'd like to move that we defer the decision on the accessory residential building with variances at 16 Taylor Drive.
Thank you. Do we have any questions or concerns as to process? I would also extend that question to the proponent as a courtesy. Do you have any questions before we render our decision today?
Nope. I'm gonna gather some more information and then work with. Yes. And then we'll go from there. Thank you for your time.
Very good. Thank you. All right, everybody's clear with the motion before us? All those in favor? I see none opposed. That is unanimous. Yes, that is for deferment. Thank you. We have went through our summary of permits already. And as was stated earlier, our next upcoming meeting is scheduled for September 4th, of which there is, at this point, certainly only one though. Okay. I believe that concludes our business for today. So if we could have an official motion. Member Contenti.
So move that we adjourn this meeting.
Thank you. Record will reflect it is now 5:43. Those in favor? Unanimous for adjournment. Thanks, everyone.